Every year, alcohol kills nearly 3 million people worldwide. It causes more than 200 diseases and injuries, yet it is one of the most aggressively marketed products on earth. In wealthier countries where drinking is already high and regulations are sometimes tighter, the market is saturated. So the alcohol industry has turned south to Africa, Asia and Latin America. For global giants like Diageo, AB InBev and Heineken, these regions represent billions of potential new customers, young populations, rising incomes and weak regulation. For the people living here, the risks are vast. The global south, low and middle income countries that together hold 85% of the world's population, has historically seen far less drinking. In many places, alcohol was limited by culture or religion, and traditional drinks were brewed locally in small amounts. But in recent decades, alcohol multinationals have poured billions into changing that, working to turn non-drinkers into consumers and casual drinkers into loyal customers.
Let's focus on Southeast Asia or ASEAN. Alcohol consumption is rising significantly, especially for countries like the Philippines, my country, with young populations. In the Philippines, the number of people consuming alcohol and partaking in binge drinking has grown tremendously.
Many of the biggest alcohol companies in the global south are controlled by multinationals from the north. Heineken owns many breweries across these countries, including Sierra Leone Brewery, Thai Asia Pacific Brewery, and Red Stripe in Jamaica. AB InBev took over SABMiller in Africa, and Ambev and Grupo Modelo in Latin America, and Diageo controls East African breweries and India's United Spirits, among many others. This global takeover has fueled rising consumption in many countries. In India and Vietnam, drinking has more than doubled in the past 2 decades. In China, it surged, then fell back. But national averages hide the real story. In much of the global south, fewer people drink compared to the west, yet those who do often drink far more heavily.
We know that from the beginning of this century, alcohol prevalence has dropped 14% in the region. That's good news. However, on the other side, alcohol consumption has increased. This means even though we have less percentage of population consuming alcohol, those who still consume are using greater quantities of this substance.
So they drink to get smashed, as you would probably say, yeah. And that causes great strife.
Aggressive industry expansion and dangerous drinking patterns have driven major increases in harm. In Vietnam, alcohol deaths have quadrupled since 1990, and death rates are among the highest in the world. Cambodia, Mozambique and Myanmar have also seen increases, with alcohol death rates in many global south countries far above the global average. In wealthier countries, most harm comes from non-communicable diseases like alcohol-related liver disease, cancer and heart disease. In some countries in the global south, alcohol collides much more with infectious diseases. Globally, nearly 1 in 9 alcohol deaths are from tuberculosis, HIV or respiratory infections. In sub-Saharan Africa, this link is especially stark. For instance, heavy drinkers are responsible for more than half of new HIV infections in South Africa. Alcohol is also more closely linked to gender-based violence.
The biggest thing that we're experiencing in the Southern African region, at least, is gender-based violence. That has certainly been a definite pattern that has emerged across the region. The evidence shows that where there's more alcohol available, there'll be more consumption and there'll be more harm. But interpersonal violence amongst young men specifically is also related to alcohol. So interpersonal violence is one of our biggest issues that has emerged.
The global south is the new frontier for lots of intersecting reasons. Many countries in the global south have seen big increase in their populations and increasing wealth and disposable incomes, at the same time as a cultural shift to being more accepting of drinking.
What factors can explain this growth in alcohol consumption? First is the rapid high economic growth, resulting in higher disposable income and a larger middle class. That means the middle class having more income that it can use for non-essential goods.
Diageo says it expects more and more of its business to be in the global south. In a recent annual report, it stated that Africa and India together represent almost half of the global growth opportunity for our industry, and that in Asia Pacific, our focus is to grow in both developed and emerging markets across our entire portfolio. This growth strategy isn't to be underestimated. AB InBev's purchasing of SABMiller was the third biggest merger in corporate history and was predicated on increasing the sale of beer in Africa. The move into low and middle income countries mirrors the moves the tobacco industry made in penetrating these markets, with aggressive marketing strategies that accompanied this. And although the industry targets everyone with its marketing, across the global south it particularly targets young people and women. As Diageo has stated, we need to speak to both sets of audiences, not just be male-centric.
Being a profit business, the alcohol industry would try to get everyone in the population to drink alcohol. But its primary target, first, the youth, especially young professionals with higher incomes, with higher disposable incomes.
We have very few young women or women that drink. And so there is quite an aggressive targeting of young women to try and get them to consume alcohol. So we see a shift in the products that's available. About 2 years ago, we saw an ad that advertised a perfume for young girls called Brutal Fruit. But Brutal Fruit is also a very specific alcohol that is targeted, or product that is targeted at women.
Gendered marketing by producers pushes sweetened drinks and empowerment slogans to expand drinking among women, even though women face greater health risks at lower levels of consumption. Targeted products in the global south are often cheap, entry-level drinks designed to hook new consumers. Companies frame them as safer than traditional brews, while keeping prices low through weak regulation and minimal taxes. Before SABMiller was acquired, it purposefully kept beer costs very low so as to grow in low-income economies where people had little to spend. The company also launched Chibuku Shake Shake, a sorghum beer marketed as safer than home brews, a strategy other brewers quickly copied. Another tactic is small packaging that makes alcohol more affordable and appealing to youth. In India, mini bottles and sachets became hugely popular, despite evidence they were appealing to children. Uganda banned sachets in 2019 and Nigeria in 2024, but weak enforcement allowed loopholes and substitute products to flourish.
These companies aggressively promote their products through social media and traditional media, through influencers and celebrities. These celebrities in turn have a huge following, and their followers are easy or captive targets of the alcohol industry. The alcohol industry positions the product as a necessary part of an aspirational lifestyle. Again, something very tempting for the middle class and the upper class.
Today, some of the most powerful marketing happens online, from influencer campaigns and endless social media ads to delivery apps that put cheap alcohol a tap away. These tactics let global brands reach young people across the global south with unprecedented access and speed. In many global south countries, drinking is less about bars and pubs and more about community settings, where alcohol is often informally produced and traded. Weak regulation fuels a huge market in unrecorded alcohol, and the abundance of informal outlets drives up availability with very little oversight or control.
In Southern Africa, unlicensed outlets in residential areas is probably our most biggest pressing issue. So at a place like Carlsberg, they found that there was over 1,000 outlets, of which only 11% was licensed. So technically it means that about 900 outlets.
In South Africa, around 14% of alcohol is illicit, often through tax evasion or unlicensed brewing. Even big brewers are drawn into this market. While South African Breweries has claimed that most of its beer goes to licensed retailers, a government report estimated that 70 to 80% is actually consumed in unlicensed outlets. What looks like a threat to big business can in fact work in its favour. As one study found, informal trade in alcohol has strategic value to the industry by normalising a culture of drinking, creating addiction, and entrenching barriers to entry. The extraordinary reach of alcohol companies in the global south has deep roots in colonialism. European powers once used alcohol as both revenue and control, expanding production, eroding traditional restrictions, and embedding foreign firms in local economies. In Nigeria, Heineken profits made up much of colonial income, while in Ghana, alcohol was promoted as a symbol of modernity and progress. These companies built close ties with colonial administrations, gaining privileged access to land, infrastructure, and markets. When independence came, many of those structures remained. Governments relied heavily on alcohol taxation, foreign firms still held political influence, and trade agreements kept local producers at a disadvantage. And global alcohol companies now draw vast profits from low and middle income countries, while the social and financial costs of harm are left behind. A 2021 study described this as a double burden of maldistribution. Alcohol's health and social harms fall hardest on disadvantaged groups and governments in poorer countries, while the wealth it generates flows outward. Over 95% of the value of the 5 biggest alcohol firms is held in Europe and the US, with virtually none in the global south. The harms stay local, but the money goes abroad.
This is a perfect example of neo-colonialism, right? Like these companies based from the West are going in, extracting value at great cost, great social cost, to take back to their shareholders in the West.
This entrenching of political and social power, alongside weaker regulation in the global south, means that alcohol multinationals enjoy enormous influence across these countries today.
Let's be blunt. The alcohol industry is the main villain. It is understandable that businesses want profits. They exist mainly for profit. The problem, however, is amassing profit at the expense of the health of the people. Unfortunately, there is weak enforcement of regulation, weak enforcement of government policies to control alcohol drinking.
In sub-Saharan Africa, only a handful of countries, such as South Africa, Malawi and Kenya, have even attempted multi-policy frameworks to address alcohol harm. Most others have not implemented the WHO's recommendations, in part due to limited resources, but also because of industry interference. Research shows Sab Miller took leading roles in policy development in Lesotho, Malawi, Uganda and Botswana, producing draft policies that prioritised economic arguments and sidelined proven health measures.
So we have found that the alcohol industry has gone to the extent where they wrote the text of the draft policies and excluded civil society from participating, trying to pass it through the system. The worst case scenario is in Lesotho, where the soft copy of the policy had disappeared off the system. And literally now they have to rewrite policy.
Such influence is not confined to Africa. In the Philippines, San Miguel has long been tied to the Nationalist People's Coalition, one of the country's most powerful political parties, giving the company direct leverage over legislation in Congress. And in India, Diageo spent 6 years paying bribes to officials to authorise the sale of its drinks, part of a pattern repeated in Thailand, South Korea and beyond. The COVID-19 pandemic highlighted how quickly these dynamics come into play. In South Africa, temporary sales bans were introduced to ease pressure on hospitals. The industry responded with misinformation campaigns, legal threats, and public attacks on researchers whose studies showed reduced injuries and deaths. AB InBev even took the government to court, though the case was dismissed. And when stronger laws do get passed, the industry fights back in the courts, from lawsuits against governments to investor-state disputes and trade law challenges. These tactics are used to delay, water down, or even block life-saving public health measures. Companies also work to create conflict within government.
So what they do is they target the Ministry of Transport, they target the Ministry of Social Development, the Ministry of Education, and they work with them in the South African context at provincial level and at national level.
In Colombia, alcohol companies donated more money than any other industry sector, with AB InBev donating to 6 of the largest political parties.
Also, the industry uses financial incentives, such as paying enormous amounts of money to political campaigns and political parties. In fact, the top 5 donors of political parties in Colombia have interests in alcohol industry businesses.
Efforts to strengthen regulation are often stalled by lobbying. In South Africa, the draft Liquor Amendment Bill of 2016 aimed to restrict advertising and limit availability, but industry lobbyists dominated the process, even suggesting schools should be built around alcohol outlets rather than closing outlets near them. Alongside lobbying come human rights abuses. In Brazil, InBev and Heineken were fined in 2021 for using Venezuelan migrants in conditions described as modern slavery. 2 years later, Heineken's subsidiary Kaiser was placed on Brazil's slave labour list. During Carnival in 2025, InBev and local authorities were implicated in exploitative practices, with one vendor saying, "We make the carnival happen and we are enslaved." Heineken is also a shareholder in China's CR Beer, which sources hops from the Xinjiang region, where forced labour of Uyghurs has been widely documented. Investigations in Africa revealed further abuses. Journalist Olivier Van Beemen's book, Heineken in Africa, uncovered the company's reliance on promotion girls, women hired to push alcohol in bars, often harassed and poorly paid. An internal 2007 report admitted 15,000 such women were vulnerable for misuse, yet the company dismissed responsibility. Heineken's CEO at the time, Jean-Francois van Boxmeer, said in an interview that Heineken cannot be responsible if a customer treats a promoter inappropriately, as they can't control everything. Instead, he blamed the intermediary agencies that hired promotion women. Van Boxmeer had previously referred to the Me Too movement as a Western phenomenon, and in the 1990s had an affair with a beer promoter. Van Beemen also argues Heineken was complicit in grave crimes, continuing production during Rwanda's genocide, despite alcohol fueling many of the killings, and replacing murdered Tutsi drivers with Hutu staff. And in Burundi, the poorest country in the world, its tax revenues help sustain a brutal dictatorship accused of torture and disappearances.
Well, nowadays Burundi, it's a very complicated situation. There's a dictator there, and Heineken is very, very important in Burundi. It has major revenues. It gives major revenues to the regime, and according to many people, it is even the lifeline for this regime. If Heineken decided to stop, then the regime would collapse, and maybe something better would appear.
In South Africa's wine regions, multiple investigations have exposed abuses. Poverty-level wages, exposure to toxic pesticides, and even echoes of the banned DOP system, where workers were partly paid in wine. The 2016 documentary Bitter Grapes showed people living in cardboard shelters on as little as $4 a day, and described the situation as a global race to outsource work to some of the poorest people in the world. The industry uses tactics in some low and middle income countries that would seem unthinkable in other contexts. Between 2014 and 2016, Heineken-owned Nigeria breweries ran health symposia claiming beer had medical benefits. Doctors and professors were hired to tell audiences it could reduce kidney stones, improve brain function, and even lower breast cancer risk.
One of our biggest challenges is political stability and political will. Given the development challenges that we have in the region, alcohol will always be more at the bottom of the list for our governments.
That vacuum allows multinational companies to shape policy in their own image, and while causing immense harm, they rebrand themselves as responsible actors. Through corporate social responsibility, they claim to solve the very problems they create. In reality, CSR often serves as marketing, polishing reputations, distracting from abuses, and deflecting pressure for stronger regulation.
Because the alcohol industry sees us as the new frontier to be conquered, they spend a lot of money on marketing alcohol consumption towards young people. They spend a lot of money on CSI programs, trying to legitimize themselves in the eyes of both government and community, and they promote themselves as a job creator within our context where there is a lot of unemployment.
A major CSR focus is water and farming, issues where alcohol production is especially damaging. Brewing and distilling consume vast amounts of water, often in drought-prone regions, and diverts farmland from food to raw materials for alcohol. but companies adopt CSR campaigns to divert attention from this fact. For instance, in Tanzania in 2024, Diageo partnered with the charity WaterAid to provide clean water, distracting from its role in over-extracting water. And Carlsberg partnered with WaterAid in South India in 2023 to conserve and protect water. In Mexico, Constellation Brands, the owner of Corona, sought to build a brewery in the already water-scarce Mexicali Valley. It would have used nearly 7 billion litres of water a year from the Colorado River, while local people relied on water for growing food. After mass protests and a referendum where 3/4 voted against it, the project was cancelled. In 2020, then-President André Obrador said, "Of course there was corruption. How do you grant a permit to build a brewery that consumes water where there is a shortage?" Yet the threat remains. Current President Claudia Sheinbaum tweeted about meeting Constellation executives and their interest to invest in Mexico. Elsewhere in Mexico, AB InBev extracts billions of litres in the Altiplano, while Heineken's Monterrey brewery drew heavily on groundwater during a record drought. Under pressure, Heineken donated water back to the state, but only after draining resources in the first place. And in South Africa, similar tensions play out. During Cape Town's 2018 drought, vineyards expanded even as municipal taps ran dry. Farming is another CSR focus of the industry. In 2020, Sierra Leone Brewery built 3 water boreholes, positioning it as supporting local farmers. Yet the year before, the company had pushed farmers to expand sorghum production, not to feed the local population, but to enable increased production of alcohol. So this support was explicitly profit-driven. In Zimbabwe, Delta Corporation likewise promoted a sorghum contracting scheme, not to feed communities, but to supply its Jabuku and Eagle lager brands. Across a continent where hundreds of millions face malnutrition, land is diverted from food crops to raw materials for alcohol, deepening food insecurity and leaving farmers vulnerable when corporate support shifts. In Sri Lanka in 2024, the National Agrarian Unity Organisation warned that rice shortages were worsening as more grain was channelled into alcohol production. Their president said that alcohol should not come at the expense of the daily food needs of the people. Even where companies fund new farming technologies, as Diageo has done, the aim is clear: innovation that benefits its business bottom line. Another strategy the alcohol industry uses in the Global South is cultural appropriation, embedding brands into national heritage, sports and identity. The goal is to make drinking inseparable from pride and tradition. Heineken's 2023 takeover of Distell and Namibian breweries was promoted as tailoring products to local preferences. In practice, that tailoring often means borrowing cultural symbols to give foreign-owned brands a local face. In Ghana, Club Premium Lager is marketed as a national icon, wrapped in the flag and tribal symbols, while Guinness's Made of Black campaign claimed to celebrate African creativity, but was ultimately about beer sales. Uganda breweries funded an elephant monument in Gulu as a supposed marker of Akoli pride, tied directly to its Tusker brand. This practice extends far beyond Africa. Carlsberg released cans decorated with indigenous symbols in Malaysia, targeting minority communities already facing disproportionate harm. And in 2025, San Miguel's Kabayani Kita campaign in the Philippines framed drinking as an act of patriotism and resilience. Sports sponsorship is another powerful route. In many countries, alcohol brands bankroll sports teams, presenting themselves as essential to sustaining sports.
Most popular basketball in the Philippines is sponsored by the alcohol industry. It's called the San Miguel basketball team, and San Miguel is the top-selling beer in the Philippines.
By embedding alcohol in culture, heritage and sport, companies turn products into identity markers, strengthening their grip on societies and making regulation politically harder to achieve. But in many countries, communities and civil society are pushing back. From grassroots campaigns to broad national coalitions, citizens are showing that industry power can be challenged when people organise and demand change.
In the Philippines, I am proud to be a member of a very broad civil society coalition. It is called the Syntax Coalition. This coalition of civil society organizations, medical professionals, and other concerned citizens have chalked up victories through the years.
We need to bring together all the interests of civil society that is interested in protecting human rights. We need to bring together women's rights organizations, road safety organizations, healthcare and patient organizations, youth leaders together, because we all have a common interest in reducing alcohol harm and its consequences in terms of social destruction and social costs.
Just in the past 2 years, the South African government tried to include a clause in the amendment of the education bill where they wanted to allow schools to have a liquor license for fundraising purposes. We mobilized the education sector in South Africa and some of the other developmental players and basically mobilized communities and we won.
The alcohol industry treats the global south as its next frontier, extracting wealth and leaving behind harm. Yet communities are resisting, showing that collective action can defend health, human rights and dignity. The challenge now is for governments to match that courage.